So in each one of these recent videos, I've been getting small increments of new hardware. Like I got a new board, I got new markers, I guess colors count. I got a new mic, which you guys are currently hearing me on, and today I'd like to share with you my newest piece of equipment, which is pretty exciting. I got an eraser. What is happening, guys? So we are back today with our final typing that we're looking into for the Nightmare Cup. So we're looking at our top 5 dark type Pokemon today. And when I say top 5, what I actually mean is, let me change my wording just a little bit here. So these are the top 5 best Generalist dark types, meaning that their viability spreads really wide. They have really good matchups up against the majority of the cup. So I feel like that Generalist role is somewhere that you can start whenever you're starting to build a team. If you have a full team of 6 of just all Generalists, then you may do like pretty well. I feel like you would probably do around like 50 or 60% placings in your tournament. Like if there was 8 people, maybe you would rank like 4th or 3rd, somewhere around there. With a combination of these Generalist Pokemon and some specialty picks, I think that's what makes a really good team. I think that's what molds together a really nice team composition. And these 3 videos for all 3 of the typings are more or less to get you started on the Generalist. The deep dives are more focused on mainly the specialist and finding what these Pokemon are actually special towards, like what their defined role is on a team. I really don't like touch too much on like team composition in these videos, but once I actually do a little bit of that research for myself and I make maybe a couple of videos about like actual team composition, then we'll start talking a little bit more about that. I do really want to mold that into our deep dives, and we can even start talking about it as early as these type videos in the new cups, because I think it would be a nice place to get a good idea about how to build these Generalists into your team. So, without further ado, let's actually get started with our dark types. So, in these typing videos, I end up taking the top 5 most viable Pokemon from the dark typing. Now, all of this data does come from PvPoke. All of the sims that I run are on a 1 versus 1 shield situation to kinda try to give the most fairness between the Pokemon. And other than that, the bulk and the stat product kind of stuff comes from my own personal spreadsheets, which if you're interested in glancing at those, that link will also be in the description. Now, let's actually get started here. So, our top 5 Pokemon can kind of be broken down into 3 different categories. You have a top bulk Pokemon, a top stat product, and a top viability. So when we talk about bulk, Umbreon actually is our bulkiest dark type in the Nightmare Cup. A Lowland Raticate and a Lowland Muck end up following Umbreon for 2nd and 3rd, and then Drapion and Spiritomb actually end up pulling out the 4th and 5th slot there. Now, in terms of stat product, it's a very similar list, but just kind of a few of these are flipped around. So Umbreon still pulls out the number 1 spot, a Lowland Muck pulling up 2nd now, Drapion pulling in 3rd, and a Lowland Raticate actually ends up becoming 4th, with Spiritomb being our 5th slot there. Now, in terms of viability, these Pokemon come straight from PvPoke.com. These are the top dark Pokemon as for how they perform amongst a wide spread of the entire meta. These Pokemon are not on this list because they are the best Pokemon at the dark role. These are the best dark Pokemon up against everything in the meta. I want to stress that, okay? So our top viable Pokemon is actually Spiritomb. So Spiritomb actually carrying Sucker Punch, Ominous Wind, and Shadow Ball actually ends up being our best dark type Pokemon in this cup. That's pretty interesting considering that Spiritomb's typing is dark and ghost. He has a unique set of weaknesses. Up until, if I'm not mistaken, Gen 6, he didn't have a weakness, which was kind of cool. So being only weak to Fairy ends up giving him a really interesting place in this meta, considering that most things in this cup are only going to be hitting for neutral damage, if not resisted damage, which is pretty cool. But there are some drawbacks to Spiritomb because we've already done a deep dive on him. I do encourage you to go look into that video for a more detailed analysis of Spiritomb himself. But basically he gets kind of shafted when it comes to going up against the other dark types. And we'll kind of see that when we go over some of these matchups here. So our second most viable dark type Pokemon is actually Shiftry. Shiftry running Razor Leaf, Leaf Blade, and Foul Play here is a big deal. So he has several really good matchups, and I'm really looking forward to doing a deep dive on Shiftry. If no one's actually commented to do Shiftry, I definitely want to look into Shiftry. Number 3 is actually Skuntank, and Skuntank is nice because Skuntank actually coming back from the Twilight Cup makes him a pretty easy investment if you already invested in one a couple of months ago. So it's kind of a nice breather, a nice relaxing, I don't have to spend any more Stardust, I already have Skuntank. Skuntank with Poison Jab, Crunch, and Flamethrower is a really nice addition to any team needing a General Dark attacker. Umbreon actually pulls in as the 4th slot here with Snarl, Foul Play, and Last Resort. Even though Last Resort is a legacy move, it is pretty necessary to go up against some of the Pokemon in this cup. Having that access to neutral damage towards the other dark types really makes it a little bit more viable against its own typing, but unfortunately not having access to anything but dark type fast moves really sticks it in a similar situation to Spiritomb actually. Pulling in at number 5 here we do have a Lowland Muck. Now with Poison Jab, Dark Pulse, and Sludge Wave, it actually ends up having a really interesting set of tools to work with and actually does really good. So let's actually talk a little bit about our matchups here. So I know that all of this looks extremely crazy. There's a ton of stuff written up here, but easy to understand. We'll go through each and every one of these, kind of give you an idea on how these Pokemon actually perform. So let's start with Spiritomb and work our way down to our number 5 slot here. So these top 4 are going to be your dark types, the middle 4 are going to be your psychics, and our final 4 are going to be your fighting types. So going up against our dark types, Spiritomb actually has a favorable matchup up against a couple of these Pokemon, but Absol is kind of the only one that really I can see being viable in the cup in some sense. Like Absol having access to some thunder moves gives it a unique situation up against some of the flying types that could appear like Xatu and Honchkrow. Other than that, Spiritomb actually does end up beating Cacturne, and then we end up tying against Murkrow, Nuzleaf, and Spiritomb itself. But other than that, we actually end up losing to every other dark type, including Shiftry, Alolan Raticate, and Umbreon. So pretty big deal considering we have a hard time up against our own typing here. Moving on to our psychics here, we actually do end up tying against Alolan Raichu. Here is that situation where Alolan Raichu actually is able to do a ton of neutral damage to our Spiritomb here, and it ends up hurting the Spiritomb quite a bit. Other than Alolan Raichu though, we do win against all of the other psychics, no big deal coming from there. Having access to those ghost type charge moves really does end up helping in that psychic matchup. Moving on to our fighting types here, so we actually end up losing up against Machamp and Poliwrath, but we do have favorable matchups up against both Heracross and Gallade. Kind of interesting. Moving on to Shiftry here, so Shiftry is, like I said, he's very unique, having access to Razor Leaf, Leaf Blade, Leaf Tornado. Like, he's got a lot of different options to kind of go with, and whenever we do a deep dive on him, I'd really be interested to figure out exactly how to tune him to really get the maximum potential out of him. He'll be an interesting look. Up against the dark types though, we do end up losing to both Alolan Muck and Drapion, but we end up beating Umbreon and Alolan Raticate here. So not too bad. It's kind of a toss-up, just kind of depends on which Pokemon out of the dark typings that you're going up against. Moving on to our psychics here, Xatu and Bronzong actually give us quite a bit of problems. Bronzong, no surprise there, it's a beast. it does resist a ton of our stuff. Xatu actually having access to flying type moves really is going to hurt our Shiftry's grass typing here. And then Chimecho and Alolan Raichu are no problem for Shiftry, being able to just output either a ton of neutral damage or trying to sneak in some dark type damage there to actually secure those matches. And for our fighting types here, so Heracross does give us quite a bit of problems with access to bug type moves. Toxicroak having a pretty good resistance to a lot of our damage here ends up giving us a lot of trouble, but Poliwrath and Gallade also end up falling here to our Shiftry. So Skuntank here actually up against the dark types has pretty favorable matchups. Having access to poison type moves really ends up setting us up to do a lot of neutral damage here. Unfortunately, Lowland Muck has a pretty favorable matchup up against us though, so we end up losing to him. Spiritomb, Umbreon, and Shiftry though, no problem there. Up against the Psychics, here it's kind of similar to our Shiftry. Alolan Raichu and Bronzong end up giving us a lot of trouble, while things like Kadabra and Chimecho are no problem for us. Into the fighting area, Breloom actually has a ton of trouble. Considering that Breloom does have a weakness to poison, it really can hurt us there. Heracross also running into that, where we end up just being able to overwhelm it with a poison type damage. But Lucario and Toxicroak end up giving Skuntank a run for their money. So it kind of ends up balancing a little out there in the fighting area. Moving on to Umbreon here. So Drapion, Skuntank, and Alolan Muck all end up beating our Umbreon, while Spiritomb can actually end up easily being beaten by the Umbreon here. When we get to our Psychics though, you can see every single Psychic type falls to Umbreon. Umbreon is a big deal whenever it comes to forcing the Psychic type matchups. Moving on to our fighting types though, everything except for Gallade ends up having trouble. We actually have trouble with Primeape, Lucario, and Heracross, all giving our good old Umbreon some sweet, sweet damage, while Gallade, carrying that Psychic type, ends up having a hard time receiving the damage from the Dark type moves. Lastly here we do have Alolan Muck. So Alolan Muck actually is pretty split between the dark types. Things like Drapion, Skuntank end up giving us a lot of problems, while Umbreon and Spiritomb are no problem for Alolan Muck. Now in the Psychic area, Alolan Raichu is actually pretty bad for the Muck matchup. We end up having a lot of trouble going up against Alolan Raichu. Xatu is a tie, and then Bronzong and Gardevoir, no problem there. Now, in terms of our fighting types, Lucario and Toxicroak do actually give us quite a bit of problems, while things like Heracross and Gallade are no big deal from us. So, the biggest takeaway from this video is, out of these dark typings, there are several really good generalists. Spiritomb we've already done a deep dive on, and I was talking about how it's kind of underwhelming. It is hyped up a lot, and it does have a really good role as a general attacker. You just kind of get walled off by a lot of your dark types. But that can be said about a lot of these guys. If you don't have access to a non-dark type fast move, you can end up getting walled pretty hard here. So like Spiritomb and Umbreon have a really hard time with going up against the other dark type Pokemon, while things like Shiftry, Skuntank, Alolan Muck, they all have it pretty easy, considering they can just use a neutral type damage up against the dark type matchups. So that is actually all that I have for the dark types. Hopefully these 3 videos actually have helped you get started on turning the wheels into crafting your team that you want to make for the Nightmare Cup. I already did a one best of 3 with the Nightmare Cup, and it's actually really fun. It's a nice breath of fresh air to just not have to worry about, you know, ball meta and things of the sort from the Kingdom Cup. But I'm super excited to get started on these deep dives. Please make sure that if you have a Pokemon that you're looking forward to, please comment down below. I will be happy to put it in the spreadsheet so that we can start tallying them up and just getting through all of these Pokemon as quickly as possible. As of right now, as of this video, as I'm recording, Lucario is up next, Bronzong after that, and then we have Alolan Muck pulling in. But Alolan Muck is actually tied with Heracross, Skuntank, Toxicroak, Umbreon, Xatu, Honchkrow. So he's tied for quite a lot, but I will just go in order as best as I can to get all of these done for you guys. Just please make sure that if you are looking for specific deep dives, please let me know so that I can get to them for you. And as of that, we are officially done looking at our 3 typings in general and finding which ones are the best general attackers out of all 3 typings. Being that there's only 3 typings this month, it does kind of make some interesting points because we don't have such a huge pool of Pokemon to pick from. It's kind of a smaller pool, which is, it's okay. I can deal with that. It kind of narrows down some of the points that we have to make whenever we kind of build our team of 6. So that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really do encourage you to comment down below, and if you want to check out the spreadsheet that I use for a lot of my videos, if you want to check out any of that information, go down into the description. Also, there is a link for the Discord. You can hop on there. We can discuss anything that you want to talk about. There's plenty of people that are willing to discuss and talk about anything you want to talk about as well. Other than that, though, I think that's it. So, until our next video, make sure that if you like to like videos, you do that. If you don't, you can be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below. And until tomorrow, I will catch you then.